Okay, welcome back to another vintage fishing reel service and possibly repair video, and in this case maybe also a restoration video. In this episode we'll be working on a Shakespeare Spin Wondereel Deluxe number 1800, and the model is, it's really hard to see the second letter, but that's a G, F-G. And if you look at the Shakespeare date codes, that would make this one a 1954. Now I've got two of these, and both of them were missing the crank handle, and I've borrowed this one off of a similar model Shakespeare for now. This is another one of those where this bakelite knob on the crank was just seized up where you couldn't move it. You have to be really careful about forcing it with pliers because this stuff can be really brittle and shatter. So it was a matter of letting that soak for a day or two in WD-40, wrapping this with a towel and kind of trying to get it to move, and then eventually just working it until all that corrosion worked its way out, and now it's working fine. But this is another one of the underspins. So this reel is held under the rod like a regular spinning reel would be, and then you wind with, if you're right-handed, you typically would wind with your left hand and of course cast with your right, and you want to put this on a rod that allows you to set it pretty far back on the rod butt so that you've got plenty of room in front of the reel so that you can grab the line, because you have to grab the line, and then when you release the line you do that by a backward turn on the handle. You need to be holding the line when that happens, and it's sort of like a kind of a hybrid between a Spincast and a spinning reel. It looks like this one must have had a dent in it, and then somebody went on the inside and punched the dent out with a regular punch, because you can see punch marks coming out. So somebody got inside there and punched out a dent or something. But this is one of these underspin models. Not all of them, not all of the Shakespeare underspins have this, but let's release this line off of this. You have to kind of back off the line pickup to get the cover off. But this is has an oscillating spinner head on it. Like most of these underspins, many or most, the drag is operated by is essentially on and operated by the nose cone. So when you screw it on, okay, and to a certain point you're just putting the nose cone back on. But when it first starts to stop, that lip in there has a felt drag washer on it, and so as you continue to screw down, it's putting pressure on the spool so that's creating drag, so that makes it harder for the spool to spin if a fish is pulling on it or whatever, and that's your drag. So we're going to go ahead and start to disassemble this and clean it up. And I think what I want to do is I want to sort of restore this one. This model, for some reason, I don't know what that, I guess the thing about this material, this color paint underneath the final paint, you'd think it's some kind of a primer or something, but even the primer kind of looks shiny and metallic. So I don't know what's going on there, but this model, characteristically, the original exterior paint sort of peels off, leaving this lighter green, I assume some kind of primer or coating whatever it was, it didn't work very well because the paint typically peels off of these. It's just pretty, it looks like somebody tried to paint over it, but that's not the case. That's all factory paint. It's just the outer layer is peeling off. But I'm going to sort of restore this one and try to get, basically strip off all the paint, try to get a relatively matching color. It's not going to be probably possible to perfectly match it, and I don't mix paints or anything like that. It's just going to be what I can get off the shelf. And I thought maybe with this one I might have some fun and paint it a different color. And I was thinking about maybe painting it sort of like a pastel baby blue, something like you'd see on a 1950s car or something like that, and just have maybe a little bit of fun with that one. But for now, we're going to get to work disassembling and cleaning this one and getting ready to restore the exterior and make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Okay, we're going to start off with removing obviously the cover, putting that in the parts bin, and then perhaps the next logical step would be to remove the spinner head. And it turns out that sure looks like it's made for a coin, so let's go ahead and use our coin. A lot of these were made with the idea that fishermen, like a lot of things back then, they were made such that you could easily service them. They encouraged you to service and work on your own, and they tried to make that easy. If you even had a coin in your pocket, you could take things apart and so on and so forth. Nowadays, things are made in a way that maybe isn't quite so simple. So off comes the spinner head, and you can see now that screw doesn't want to come out, so that may be sort of pressed in there, which is good. One less thing to lose. You can see the pickup mechanism, kind of an interesting looking pickup pin. It's on a metal plate there. Now we'll get that in the parts tray and get that cleaned and lubricated. Now I just worked on one. I was going to say, I just worked on one of these not too long ago. I should be able to figure out, wasn't this the same number and model, but same type of deal with regard to the spool. So that just slides off, and you can see lots of really, really old, hard grease on there. Good Lord. Maybe that hasn't been, maybe this reel hasn't even been serviced since 1950 by God 4, for all we know. Alright, let's take off the side plate. And remembering the last time I did one of these Shakespeare underspins, I barely turned the screw and the head popped off. So hopefully we can avoid that this time. I'm running out of donor screws for these. Oh, looky there. You just can't turn the things without the heads coming off. It's not like I'm forcing it. May not be able to do my baby blue reel. I'll have to steal all the screws off of it to make this one work. I'll find some somewhere. Put these, I got kind of a divided parts tray here, one for the tiny little parts and one for everything else. Ooh boy, that may not have been serviced since the 50s. Look at that. Look at that tar. I mean, that's not dry, that's what you call tar. So we got to get this what's left of this screw out of here. And they turn. They must just, I don't know if they got corroded or bumped, but it's not like it's corroded in there. They turn easily. It's just the head pops off. There ain't nothing to get them out, except that I can only turn it a quarter turn at a time with these darn needle nose. But I can turn it with my fingers eventually. A relatively long screw for that. But it just must be corroded or just bad engineering. Tar on me. But that's the way it is, so no sense putting that in the parts tray. Okay, because this has a oscillating spinner head, you've got basically what amounts to a crosswind block here. And looks like there's a nut that threads onto the main axle shaft, and so I'm guessing here that if I take that nut off, that I will be able to pull this axle shaft out from the front. Okay. So there's the little nut that threads onto the axle shaft. Does appear to be a locking nut. Does look like there's some kind of nylon or some kind of insert in there, so that's good. And then it looks like there's a washer. So there's a washer that's keyed, so it's flat on two sides. Now let's just hope that this axle shaft pops out, and it does, so that can go in the parts tray. These other things can go in the parts tray. Now our crosswind block should come off. Now that looks like it does have a washer on both sides. Almost looks like there's two there, but that's just a ribbon of tar. Now we want to make sure that we remember how this goes in. So it goes in with so if that's upside down, it goes in like that, so that the concave side of that channel, this would be the concave side in, faces to the front, and the convex side of the channel faces to the rear of the wheel. Probably won't be able to get the pinion gear out until we take the main gear out. So we will, these usually have a nut and then a lock washer, and then your handle. Now if I can just keep from breaking off one of these screws, just going to barely turn. And it was typically the ones, I think it was on that side, so you wonder if there was some kind of corrosion caused from gravity or something. I don't know. Alright, it did come out. I thought I felt that head come off, but I didn't. So there's side plate, and then you can get the main gear out. Alright. Now that'll just pop right out of there. I don't see any washers of any kind. It looks like to be all one piece. So we can put that in the parts tray. Nothing there, so that can go in the parts tray. But I still want to get this axle shaft out of here. And it's almost like that washer is sort of preventing it, but I can spin it and it's not like it's unthreading out of there. And I'm not going to risk boogering it up. So, at any rate, there is our parts. and off to the sink where I'm going to end up scrubbing these hard with a toothbrush and hot water and dishwashing soap and in some cases WD-40. And I'll be back in a snap. And just like that, 20 minutes of scrubbing are all done. But before we continue on any further with this, if we're going to restore this one, now's the time to end up taking the exterior portions and stripping them of paint and priming them and painting them. And that's going to involve some masking off with tape for the silver area here, for this part here, keep the paint out of the interior, and here that'll all have to be masked off. Now this white line in the middle, that is actually painted on, it looks like, and there's no way I'm going to get a white line that perfect with a paintbrush, no matter how steady my hands. So I'm going to avoid doing that altogether. I'm just going to paint it green, and maybe I can find a real narrow piece of white pinstripe to put in there, but it's possible I could try to do it with a brush. I may decide to do that, I don't know, but I'm afraid it's just going to look like crap. If it's not straight, it's going to be obvious right away that it's not a very good job. So at any rate, I'm going to take these out to the wire wheel and start stripping paint, and the rest of this I can leave here for now. This I'm going to take out and hit with the wire wheel because that's all corroded, and the rest of this we'll have to wait till the cosmetics are done. Okay, back from the shop and the wire wheel, and we got the paint stripped off all the exterior portions of the various parts that are going to show. And so now I'm going to probably have to get down in there and pick out some of the paint out of the letters there, otherwise they'll get further obscured with new paint. But now it's time to mask off those areas that we don't want paint on, and then get to priming and painting. Now that I got this thing cleaned off, I can see what it's going to take to get the pinion gear out. This is a little clip that goes around here, and the split in it is right there. So I'm going to get that clip off there, and that'll allow me to take the pinion gear out and clean out inside there really good. So that makes me feel better. Okay, we got all the parts masked off, and now we're ready for primer and eventually paint. Okay, so I've got the exterior components primered and painted, and so you can kind of see there. It's not a perfect color match. It's probably a little bit lighter than the original, but I'm okay with that. This is not going to be a collector's item per se. Not trying to keep it pristine and original. It was pretty beat up from the get-go, so we're just making it look pretty and presentable again. But we don't want to leave that finish on there. This is basically a rattle can paint job, and that's hopefully you can see, but there's lots of overspray and stuff. So we're going to end up taking and making that look a little bit more professional by using a series of liquid abrasives. And what I use, these are not cheap. It's a 3M three-part process. Starts with the number 1, which is the rubbing compound, number 2, which is the machine polish, and number 3, which is the ultrafine machine polish. I think those are like, I don't know, $30 a bottle or more. It's been a while. I use them for paint jobs that I do on my antique tractors, but and I'm not going to use a mechanical tool. That's just going to be rubbed on with a rag. So I'm going to shake up the number 1, and I won't go through this whole process. I may show updates, but I'll just show basically how I'm going to start this. And I'm just going to put some of this number 1, the rubbing compound on, and going to kind of work that into the rag here, and then I'm just going to start rubbing that, and that abrasive is going to work down and cut into the paint and take off that overspray, and that'll leave kind of a dull finish. But as you get through the other two, it should have a much more reflective and less grainy appearance. So I'm going to work on that, and I'll give you some updates as I go. Okay, so I'm done with the rubbing compound portion, and as you can see already, the shine on that is significantly better. There's no more graininess to it, and the reflections are less diffuse, much sharper reflections in the lighting. So now time to move on to number 2, the machine polish, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, there's after the second one. You can see that the lighting is even less diffuse than it was before. And then the third one, now it did rub through the paint a little bit there because of the punches that someone used to pop out that dent. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I could probably touch that up, but go on to number 3 and see the final result. Okay, there's the final polish. I'm really happy with that. It looks, if you didn't know any better, you would think that was factory paint, except for the blemish there on the where that somebody punched out that dent. But I'm very happy with that. Now, the question with the white pinstripe that was in the groove, that was factory painted on, probably had some kind of roller or something that made it so nice and even. That's not going to happen very well with me and a paintbrush. So I opted with the with actual adhesive pinstripe, and I was going to go to the auto store and get some white, but then I noticed that I had some silver, metallic silver, that looks just like aluminum, and it fit that groove perfectly, and it really goes nice with the actual aluminum. And of course, a lot of reels have grooves like that anyway. They're basically just unpainted aluminum. I'm thinking of like the Zebco 66, the black Zebco 66, and the Zebco 606s, and so on. And so I think that aluminum colored pinstripe is going to look real nice in there, and that's what I'm going to end up taking and doing. So I'll be back to show you that. Okay, so the pinstripe is on, and I tell you what, I really like that. That looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. And so now I'm going to work on getting all the other parts buffed out, and we'll be ready to reassemble this thing. Okay, we got all the exterior painted parts buffed, and we're now ready to put this thing back together. So we're going to start with the I think there may be another piece missing from this. Obviously the handle is borrowed from another similar Shakespeare reel, but I think there was supposed to be some kind of a collar on this. This is got 2 flat sides. I've seen other pictures, and I quite frankly don't know what that collar does. But at any rate, might put a little grease around the base of this where it rides. I don't know if there was an anti-reverse. I just don't, I can't imagine anti-reverse because you wind backwards to get the thing to release. Put a little grease on, or a little oil on the shaft here, and install that in there, and go ahead and put the lock washer and handle on. And so, among other things, this nut, even though it's borrowed, it's probably a similar depth as to the original. It doesn't screw down all the way, and so that collar was important. Now, if I don't find a replacement collar, I'm going to have to shim this out with a washer so that handle isn't loose. But we can go ahead and install that side plate. Oops, wrong side. I think the wire wheel was a little too aggressive on this aluminum and created some scarring that, despite using filler primer, didn't fully fix, at least on these side plates. And so when I do the next one, I'll be more mindful of that and probably use a different method for paint removal. Maybe just rough it up, sand it up good by hand. Okay, so now we can go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit of oil underneath there and get some grease on these. And this one, because it does have that oscillating spinner head and an associated crosswind block, we'll have to also grease the interior of the main gear where that crosswind block lies, and oil that. And the first washer that goes on is not keyed. Then you put in the crosswind block, and the concave side faced towards the front of the reel. So put that on the post there. And then we have our keyed washer. And that doesn't key in until it gets past the threads. And then we have our, I'm going to move this. Okay. Okay, the keyed washer is now in place. There. Maybe it's too tight. I'll try loosening it a little first. Okay, it was just too tight, so apparently you can't tighten that thing, wrench it all the way down like that. And that's probably why it's a locking washer, so it doesn't do that. Every once in a while it catches. It might be just a hair too tight. Yep. So you want to wind it and make sure it doesn't catch, and just get that lock nut on there just tight enough that it works without binding. Alright, believe it or not, it's already time for the, I'll put that side plate on last, but time for the spool. And then, you have to get this slit right here, this notch, over that little peg that comes out of the side of the axillary shaft. And then you're ready to tighten it down. Guess I can use my quarter here. Okay, so working good that way. Now let's check the, so it takes about a quarter to a half turn to get that line pickup to release. So now we should be ready to button it up for good. We get the other side plate on there, and remembering that I broke one of the screw heads off, so I'll have to find a replacement for that. And also remembering, because of that, not to tighten these too terribly tight. Oh, look at that. They're just rotten, I'm telling you. They're just rotten. That's all there is to it. They're rotten. And, you know, I just barely turned on that with a very tiny low torque screwdriver, and it just pops right off. Okay, I've got some replacement ones here. Let's hope they work. And they do. These are about 10 years newer, so hopefully they made them better by that point. These are 1969 screws, and the other ones were 1954. Alright, so we're ready to button this thing up. I'm going to have to turn that line pickup back to get the cone on. Get that threaded on there properly. There she goes. And there you have it. A 1954 Shakespeare Spin Wondercast number 1860. Looking good again. Probably got some fingerprints on it now, but it'll clean up real nice. Pretty happy with that compared to, basically compared to what it looked like before. This is pretty much its twin. Okay, so not too bad. And now, as promised, I indicated that I was going to do a custom paint job rather than matching the original color. And I was going to do something that I thought really looked like the 1950s. And here it is. And I think this one turned out a lot better than the one that I painted the original color. And the main reason for that is I learned some things about how to prep the aluminum. Going at it with a wire brush just required too much, too aggressive, and so I hand sanded carefully. Started out with the grit necessary to get the old paint off, and then after that went to some finer grits to smooth out the aluminum. And then the other thing I did is I got a paint that had built-in primer rather than primering it first, which made it thinner and allowed me to keep the engraved work here on the side plate. And I just think that, I mean, that just screams, that powder blue just screams 1950s. I mean, look at the reflection on that. There's no overspray anymore with all the buffing. It's diffuse. It's all just hand buffing. And then, of course, the chrome had come off of had corroded off of the handle. And so I just took the wire wheel to that, took it down. Looks like it's made out of some kind of brass alloy or something, and painted that aluminum to match all the other aluminum parts. Of course, the aluminum colored pinstripe down in the groove. But man, I don't usually I usually, whether I'm doing my antique tractors or fishing reels, I usually try to, if I'm going to restore them and paint them and stuff, I try to put them back to the original. But if it's not a shelf queen and it's pretty ragged, I see no harm in having some fun with them. I mean, I'm going to use this reel. I'm going to slap this on a vintage rod and use this. I think it's neat. Speaking of vintage rod, let's put this on an old vintage rod and see how it looks. There, look at that. That is pretty neat. Sure, there might be some North Carolina fans out there that particularly like that white and blue, but that powder blue just screams, in my mind, 1950s automobile. But I'm really liking that. Okay. Thanks for watching.